Over there. You guys know the way. If you got a Bible with you, go to 1 Corinthians. We're going to be in 1 Corinthians 1 and 1 Corinthians 12 today, but we're going to get here this way. Thank you, Scott. We're in a series called At the Movies, and this week we're looking at a movie that you probably never heard of until I mentioned it last week, called Hunt for the Wilderpeople. And it's the #1 movie in New Zealand film history. What I understand, like this is a New Zealand film. It was produced in New Zealand in 2016, and then it was hit the Sundance Film Festival in the U.S. But it grossed $12 million in New Zealand. That's the #1 New Zealand film right there. So New Zealand's not known for its film industry, apparently. In the U.S., it grossed $5 million. Now, for reference, this movie's been out what was that? 7 years. For reference, Super Mario Brothers in 3 months has grossed $573 million in the U.S. and $773 million worldwide. So Super Mario Brothers sits at $1.3 billion, and I declined to preach on that one. We showed it last week in the family movie night, but I declined to preach on it. I chose instead this New Zealand film right here. And it's a great little quirky, weird, funny film, and you're probably wondering how in the world I'm going to preach on it, but you'll see in just a minute. But if you did not see the film, I want to give you a little bit of an idea of what it's about. So here's what it's about.
Ricky Baker.
He is a bad egg, a youth court regular.
We're hoping that this change of scene will help straighten him out.
You hungry? That's a silly question, isn't it? Look at you.
Ricky Baker, now you are 13 years old. You are a teenager and you're as good as gold.
Ricky, this is Heck. You can call him Uncle if you like.
No, I can't.
Lola told me to tell you that you should give me something to do. Is there anything you want me to do?
Yeah. Leave me alone.
Cool. You ever been up in that jungle before?
There's about 1 million hectares of it, buddy. It's easy to get lost.
You lost?
Oh.
I'm amazed how lost you got. You little bastard! We got no choice but to camp out here for a few weeks.
Where are you, Ricky Baker?
More on this massive national manhunt.
Faulkner is Caucasian. Well, they got that wrong because you're obviously white.
You're going to jail, you pervert.
What you call me?
You pervert.
Back up, homies, and let go of my uncle. So what do we do now?
We run. No, no. No, we don't need to run.
Huh? Oh, yeah. Let's just fast walk.
Gonna be rough. No huts, no tents, real bush life. And if you play up, I'll dump you.
Okay, Uncle.
I'd still prefer if you don't call me uncle.
Sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
What's the fastest way out of here?
Jetpack. Do you actually have a jetpack?
No? What?
We're offering $10,000 to anyone who can capture them, dead or alive. Alive. They should be alive.
Crumpy!
Oh, mate, she's a bit bumpy around here.
I love you, Ricky.
Ricky! When they asked who did this, tell them it was the Wilderpeople.
The what of people?
I'll never stop running.
Yeah, and I'll never stop chasing you. I'm relentless. I'm like the Terminator.
I'm more like Terminator than you.
I said it first, you're more like Sarah Connor. In the first movie, too, before she could do chin-ups.
Okay, so here's what I learned watching this movie. Apparently, I'm a fan of New Zealand humor. I had no idea, but I thought this movie was funny. I thought Ricky Baker was funny. I thought Auntie was funny. I thought Psycho Sam was obviously funny. And really, the DCS lady, or the Child Welfare Service, she was my favorite actress in the whole movie, was the Child Welfare Service. She was at the very end of that clip right there. Hector, not so funny, but he played a really good grumpy old man. And so that was Sam Neill. That was the only actor I recognized from the whole thing. But here's what it's about. Ricky Baker is in the foster care program in New Zealand, and he's defined as a real bad egg. He's, kick stuff, hit stuff, set stuff on fire, loitering, graffiti. They go through this whole list. But he's this real bad egg. Nobody wants to have Ricky in their home, except they take him to the home of Bella, who's this real bubbly lady in a cat sweater. And she just kind of bowls him over with love and kindness. So she wants to be called Auntie, and she just kind of slowly wins Ricky over at the first part of the movie by just her kindness. He doesn't want to be with her. He doesn't want to stay there, but she just keeps showing kindness to him. And she does it in just the right way, not too much. She doesn't push too hard. It's just the right amount. He runs away the first night. She goes out there and finds him when he wakes up. I think she's sitting over there telling him about breakfast. And she's like, well, come get some breakfast, and then you can run away after you get some breakfast in you. And so, like, she's just the perfect person to care for him. Hector is not so kind to him. So Hector is her husband, Heck, or uncle, who doesn't want to be called uncle. And so he's kind of standoffish. However, they kind of form a family. In the first 15 minutes of the movie, they form a family. And so Ricky starts to feel more comfortable there. They have this birthday party for him on his 13th birthday, and she plays that electric piano with a song that will get it. Like, I was going to show that song, but it'll get in your head, and you won't be able to hear anything the rest of the day. But he starts to feel good. They give him his present, and he's like, this is the best birthday I've ever had. And then he stops and says, this is the only birthday I've ever had. And so in the first 15 minutes, it's a real kind of feel-good, like, but the movie's we've only been going 15 minutes. There's got to be some conflict. Well, there is. Auntie suddenly dies. And Child Welfare Services informs Hector that Ricky can't stay with him because the situation has changed. And Hector is fine with it. He just says, that's life, you got to deal with it. Ricky's not fine with it. So Ricky fakes his own death, burns down the barn in the process, runs into the bush, or the Australian woods, if you will, and Hector goes off to find him. And when he finds him, Hector hurts his ankle, and they end up staying for 3 to 4 weeks while his ankle's healing. So this is the whole plot summary of the movie. During that time, Child Welfare Services shows back up and realizes that Ricky's missing. He's gone with Hector. Hector has a criminal record, and this massive manhunt begins. And the whole rest of the movie is kind of this adventure comedy bit where they're trying to elude authorities, and along the way, they kind of become friends along the way. It reminded me of this movie. If you remember this one from a couple years ago, we did Peanut Butter Falcon, and it's kind of the same type movie. You know, there's one person who desperately wants to be included and accepted and taken along on the journey, and there's another person who's kind of begrudgingly doesn't want them to come and lets them come, takes them under their wing, and along the way they form this close friendship. And this is used often in Hollywood, but I think they do a really good job. This was not Hollywood, I guess, but I think they do a really good job with this one of not overplaying their hand, if you will. Now, the theme of the movie, the overall theme is belonging. I mean, that's the whole thing. The whole movie is about belonging, and it's about family, and it's about how we all long to be a part of a family. Even if the family's not perfect, even if the family's weird, even if the family, is kind of standoffish, we still long to be part of a family. And that reminded me of, there was a group that did some ads for foster care, encouraging foster care. And you remember it was like, you don't have to be a perfect dad to be a dad, or you don't have to be a perfect mom to be a mom. You don't have to be a perfect parent in order to be a parent. And that was I thought of that watching this film. Hector was certainly not a perfect parent, but he was a parent. And that's what Ricky wanted the most, was just a parent. And so belonging's this overall theme, and we're going to talk about belonging, but there was a secondary theme in the movie too that I found watching just 2 minutes of it, and it's the 2 minutes that happened in a church. Now, this is just me, because I'm a pastor, I'm always interested in how church is portrayed in Hollywood. So, because it's kind of a commentary, it's kind of a social commentary of how people feel about churches. And so there was this 2-minute scene that happened at Bella's funeral, and it was really one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. And I'm going to use it to set up this whole message, which if you were trying to watch the movie and figure out, like some of you, when you watch these movies, you're like, I wonder what he's going to pick. I wonder which clip he's going to show out of this movie. I'm going to say this was on none of your radar. Like you were not thinking, he's going to use the funeral scene from this movie, because it's really weird and quirky. I want to show it, and then we'll kind of talk about the two things. I want to show it because I want you to pay attention to two things. I want you to pay attention to who's in the church, what the church looks like, and I want you to pay attention to what the preacher or the pastor or the priest or whoever it is in this context pay attention to what he's saying, or really what he's trying to say. So watch this. By the way, if you're watching online, you're going to get kicked off right now.
You know, sometimes in life, it seems like there's no way out. Like a sheep trapped in a maze designed by wolves. And you know that if you're ever in that situation, there are always two doors to choose from. And through the first door, it's easy to get through that door, and on the other side, waiting for you, are all the nummiest treats you can imagine. Fanta, Doritos, LMP, burger rings, Coke Zero. But you know what? There's also another door. Not the burger ring door, not the Fanta door. Another door that's harder to get through. Guess what's on the other side? Anyone want to take a guess?
Vegetables?
No. No, not vegetable. No.
Jesus?
You would think Jesus. I thought Jesus the first time I come across that door. It's not Jesus. It's another door. And guess what's on the other side of that door?
Jesus.
Jesus. Yeah, Jesus. He's tricky like that, Jesus. So let us pray to Jesus, please, to make it a bit easier to get through those doors and to find you and your bounty of delicious confectionery. Thank you, Selena. Take it away.
All right, there's two things, in my opinion, there's two basic things any church should provide for us. One is clarity, and one is community. And that church failed to provide both. And I want to talk about both of those briefly. So we're going to start with clarity. Churches have a simple message. We have the simplest message in the world. Life is better through Jesus. I mean, that's the salvation can be found through Jesus. That's the simple message of churches. But churches are notoriously guilty of cluttering up that message and making it confusing. We're notoriously guilty, and pastors are to blame a lot, for trying to make that message cutesy and entertaining and relevant, and along the way, we just make the message weird. I'm thinking of things like, when I was a youth minister in the 1990s, we did Christian t-shirts. You remember Christian t-shirts? I guess they're still out there. And you would take popular brands and co-opt them for Christianity. You know, like Jesus, sweet Savior, King of Kings, or, you know, these are kind of, enjoy Jesus Christ. What does it say and thou shalt never thirst. So, like, this was popular in the 90s, and this was, like, one of the ways that Christians, tried to be cute. I hope you don't have one of these on today because I'm making fun of them. But they get progressively worse, like relish sweet Jesus. Let's exalt his name together, or this one's the worst. Mayo light shine for Jesus. Spread it around. I sincerely hope that's a parody shirt and not a real shirt. I hope that they're making fun of this and that's not a real shirt. But those are just examples of like where we've tried to take the message of Jesus and make it cute. Other things that we do is we try to confuse or conflate the message by making every issue of biblical interpretation equal to Jesus. I mean, we take every little interpretation, every little idea from this book and make that equal to Jesus, which actually waters down the message of Jesus because we've taken all these minor issues and made them the major issue. We've become guilty of taking just a verse or two and elevating that and making our whole theology or our whole identity, even worse, around that particular verse. And I'm thinking like, there's a little verse in Revelation about the 1,000-year reign. And there's been countless debates and books and theologies and churches that have developed over whether you're a premillennial or a postmillennial. And most of us now today don't even know what either of those terms mean. But it's just one little verse. And we've kind of taken that and made it the most important verse. Or doing what the priest did in there. The priest in an effort to be relevant or to look smart, he really does neither, and he comes off as confusing. And I've heard a few sermons like that in my life. You've probably heard a few sermons like that in your life, where you're kind of watching it and going, what in the world are they talking about? Like, I don't know what in the world they're talking about. Where you try to just, and it's not just, it's become even, you think, well, it used to be that way, not that way anymore. Yeah, now that Reels and TikToks are popular, a lot of preachers like to put their stuff on a Reel and TikTok and, knock it down to 30 seconds there. And I watch a bunch of those and go, what? Like, what are you trying to say there? So sometimes in an effort to be too relevant, too smart, too cutesy, too fanatical, too fundamentalist, too deep, we confuse the message. It's like we try to take a simple message of who Jesus is and make it difficult, because our main objective, I think, a lot of times is to say, wow, look at us, how deep he is, how relevant he is, wow, that was amazing message, rather than to say, look at Jesus. And here's what the Apostle Paul had to say about it. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 26. He says, brothers and sisters, think of it when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of this world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him. It's because of him that you are in Christ Jesus, who has become for us wisdom from God, that is our righteousness, holiness, and redemption. Therefore, it is written, let the one who boast in the Lord. And so it was with me, brothers and sisters. When I came to you, I did not come with eloquence or human wisdom, as I proclaimed to you the testimony about God. For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. I came to you in weakness with great fear and trembling. My message and my preaching were not with wise and persuasive words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power, so that your faith might not rest on human wisdom, but on God's power. Now, Paul sets all of this up with quoting Isaiah 29:14 that says, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and the intelligence of the intelligent I will frustrate. And it's real fitting if you know the context, because Corinth was a very cosmopolitan city. So Corinth was a place where all of these kind of philosophers and intellectuals were constantly debating all the ideas of the day. The commentary I read about it described Corinth in this way: so-called wise men who had their own solutions to humanity's problems were on every street corner. And I'm like, hey, sounds like social media today, where you're constantly, everybody's telling you, here's the solution to every problem, and all these intellectuals are communicating their ideas and their thoughts and their philosophies. And Paul's whole point here is that the Christian message does not depend on human intellect or cultural savvy. It doesn't depend on wise and persuasive words. It doesn't depend on, this, you gotta have all the right, it doesn't depend on cultural relevance even if you want to. It depends on a demonstration of the Spirit's power. And so Paul is communicating to the Corinthian church that when we bring a message of Jesus, we don't have to be wise or influential or wealthy or strong. We just need to preach Jesus. Jesus is enough. He doesn't need us to make it appealing. He doesn't need us to make it relevant. You just preach Jesus. As the famous saying goes, if necessary, use words. So, let your actions preach Jesus. That's something that a church should provide for us, and as members of a church, that's something we should provide for our community. We provide clarity about who Jesus is. Now, the second thing, and this was really the theme of the whole movie, I was struck when I watched the funeral scene of like who's in the pews for the church, and very few, like 6 people or 7 people, and they're all spaced out, staring straight ahead, expressionless. For some of us, that was our church experience. Like that's kind of church. You sit in rows and you listen to somebody talk, and you go home, and it doesn't really make much difference in your life. And that's not really what church should be about. Like church happens in groups. It happens in circles rather than rows, we talk about. And it should be a place of belonging. So it should be a place where the Ricky Bakers of the world, where the Hectors of the world, where the Bellas of the world, maybe even the Psycho Sams of the world, it's a place where they belong and you have belonging. And Paul talks about this in Corinthians as well. And I want to go to 1 Corinthians chapter 12. You're familiar with this, but listen to it in the context of belonging. Here's what he says. He says, just as a body, though one, has many parts, but all its many parts form one body, so it is with Christ. For we were all baptized by one Spirit, so as to form one body, whether Jews or Gentiles, slave or free, and we were all given the one Spirit to drink. Even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of many. Now, if the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being a part of the body. If the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being a part of the body. And he's kind of building his basic argument. Like if you go back in these early parts of the verses here in verse 12 and verse 13, he's building his basic argument that you belong. Regardless of whether or not you feel like you belong, regardless of whether or not others may make you feel like you belong. I know that a lot of times, you you hear preachers say everybody's welcome, and you hear preachers say you belong, and church is a place for everybody, but you don't feel that way. Well, what Paul is saying, you do belong, regardless. The church is supposed to be a place of belonging. And he's explaining unity, but he's explaining also the value of diversity. And he gives this analogy between, the foot and the ear. You can't say, well, I'm not this part of the body, so I don't belong, or I'm not this part of the body, so I don't belong. He said, if the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed the parts of the body, every one of them, just as he wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. And it's about unity, but you hear the diversity. You hear both of these things. And Paul is recognizing, we as a church don't have to all agree. We shouldn't all be of the same political persuasion. We shouldn't all be of the same gender. We shouldn't all be of the same race. We shouldn't all be of the same economic background. We shouldn't all be of the same mindset doctrinally. We got to agree on Christ, but there's a lot of things that you probably believe that I don't believe when it comes to the scriptures, and that's okay. The body has different parts. We all have different gifts that we bring. We all have different talents. We all have different backgrounds. We all have different life experiences that we bring, and that's what makes the body strong. And the reason he's telling this to the Corinthians is because they were fussing. They were making divisions based upon spiritual gifts. So there were some people that said, well, if you have this spiritual gift, it's better than this spiritual gift. So people who have this spiritual gift are better than this people. And Paul's trying to explain to them, no, you need all of those gifts. You need all of those backgrounds. You need all of those experiences. You need all of that diversity. And so he uses that analogy of the body to say, if we were all the same, what good would that be? That's essentially what he's saying there. If we're all the same, what good would it be? But he says God has placed the parts in the body just as he wanted them to be. And there's many parts, but there's one body. And then I think at the end of that section, he then tells you not only that God has placed you in the body and you're a part of the body, but he talks about how to help us feel like we belong, how to help each other feel like we belong. The eye can't say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And the parts that we think are less honorable, we treat with special honor. And the parts that are unpresentable are treated with special modesty, while our presentable parts need no special treatment. But God, look at this next sentence right here, but God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. And I think what Paul's explaining there is the way you create a sense of belonging. Like, it's one thing to have a theological belief like, well, God has put the body together, so you belong. The Bible says you belong, you belong. Okay, that's the theological foundation of it. How do we communicate belonging to other people? By showing equal concern for their needs. And that's what, this description of if one part suffers, every part suffers with it. It's one part's honored, every part rejoices with it. It's the equal concern that we have for one another that communicates belonging. And if you think back to the movie, Ricky learns this early in the movie because Bella continues to show equal concern for him, Auntie. She continues to show concern for Ricky. She puts the little hot water bottle in his bed to warm up his bed. She makes sure that he has meals. She makes sure he has a birthday party. She does these little things to show that he is loved and that he belongs. And Ricky is a kid that doesn't feel like he belongs anywhere. And through those little acts of concern, she communicates to him that belongs. The interesting thing is the rest of the movie, Ricky does that for Hector. Because Hector is a grumpy old man, and you don't become a grumpy old man because life is good. You become grumpy because life's not going like you want it. And he's mourning the passage of his wife, but he's also, I don't know what's going on in Hector's life. We don't know what Hector's backstory is, but Ricky is the one who shows continuous concern for Hector. And he just kind of continually loves him and continually is kind to him. And it's just those little small acts of concern communicate to Hector that he belongs. And by the end of the movie, he's quoting haiku, which was a poetry that he learned when he was, I don't know what it was. Was he in counseling or something? He had to do a haiku to kind of help him control his anger, Ricky. And so Hector's quoting that and even begrudgingly accepts a hug. Because eventually, kindness breaks through. And everyone needs to know that they belong. And we show that with just, kind of good old-fashioned concern and care. So to me, that's the challenge of, as a community of faith, what we provide for each other and what we provide for the world is a clear message that life is better through Jesus. And we foster a community of belonging, a place where you can belong. And you do that person to person, face to face, conversation to conversation. It doesn't happen through screens. It doesn't happen through a social media strategy. It doesn't happen through lights and fog machines. It doesn't happen through hip preaching. It doesn't all the ways that churches have tried to say, oh, we're going to make Christianity relevant, and then everybody's just going to flock to the doors. People are going to flock to the doors when we make Christianity about Jesus and about belonging. Because that's one of the reasons that people flocked to Jesus, was that they felt like in his presence they belonged, that they were somebody. He valued them and welcomed them into his circle. So it has to be something that has to be practiced person to person. And we're not going to do it perfectly. I can promise you. This church does not do it perfectly. The other church that you leave this church for, because we didn't do it perfectly, they won't do it perfectly either. The church that you're coming from, because they didn't perfectly and you're coming to this church, we won't do it perfectly either. No church does it perfectly, but you don't have to be a perfect church in order to be the church. You don't have to be a perfect Christian in order to be a Christian. And so we keep striving to do that. So let me say a word of prayer for us. I got just a few announcements and we'll be dismissed, okay? Father, I thank you for the letter to the Corinthians. I'm thankful for the things that Paul wrote there. His honesty at the first part about not coming with wise and persuasive words, but just a demonstration of the Spirit's power. And then him explaining how we all belong, that you have put us in this body, you have put us here for a reason, you have arranged the parts of the body in the way that you want, and we all belong and we should show equal concern for one another. So pray you help us to do that as we go throughout our lives. And it's in the name of your Son, Jesus, pray these things. Amen. All right. Whoops. Hold on. We'll get to that in just a minute. Let's go ahead and put the offering up. So I'm going to go ahead and let you know about that. If you're giving electronically, murrayhills.com/give, text an amount to that number. You can do all that through the app. If you're giving with check or cash today, the boxes where you drop your communication cards. So if you filled out a communication card or a prayer request card, put that in those boxes, and offering goes there too. Next week's movie is The Banker. And this one was released in, I think, 2020, something like that. Samuel L. Jackson and Anthony Mackie are the two stars of this one. I think this one kind of flew under the radar during COVID for some reason, because I had not heard of it or seen it, and I just stumbled across it on Apple TV. So this is Apple TV, or you could stream it on demand. So that's next week's movie. It's a really interesting story. It's a true story about these two guys that purchased some banks in the 1960s when they were not allowed to purchase banks, and they used kind of a pseudonym to do that. So anyway, you'll see. It's a great movie. Couple of things that we need to talk about. One, if you are staying today, well, you'll be coming back today. If you RSVP'd for that, we're doing an active shooter training today, and we're doing this for all of our safety team and our children's ministry volunteers and our staff, but we decided to open it up to the church, and it was a good idea because we've got about 70-something folks registered. If you registered, we've got a box lunch for you. If you didn't register, but you would still like to come, you're welcome. You'll just have to run and get you something to eat and come back. Just bring it back. But it's going to be in this room, and it'll start about 12:30. Sergeant Jennifer Dalton will be doing that. And it's 12:30 to 2:33, something like that. It usually takes about 2 hours. The other one is I sent this via email, and I just wanted to let you know about it. Faith, Firearms, and Community Safety in Middle Tennessee. This is a panel discussion they asked me to be a part of, and so I'm kind of helping them get the word out about it. It's at First Presbyterian Church on Wednesday, July 26th at 6 p.m. And so this whole thing came out of what happened at Covenant. And there were some parents in Nashville that were connected to Covenant School that formed a group called Voices for Safer Tennessee. And they basically did what we did, except on a larger scale. When Covenant happened, our leadership got together and said, what do we do? Like, what do we do? We have to... How do we respond? What do we do? One of our responses was we need to provide more training for our volunteers and more training for our team members and our staff and that kind of stuff. This group's kind of taking that to another level and saying, what do we do as a community in Middle Tennessee? And so it's myself and Dr. C.W. Ball and a guy named Todd Cruz, who's from Nashville. He's the chairman for Voices for Safer Tennessee. And Trent Ogilvie, my buddy, is going to moderate it. And so just be watching. That'll be some stuff coming out on social media. Then the last thing I need to let you know about, and we'll get you out of here. You heard Scott talk about he's leaving very soon. He's only got 2 more Sundays after this Sunday to lead worship. And so we've had to start a search for a new worship pastor. And I wanted to give you a little update on that search. It's over. We've hired a new worship pastor. So Tiffany Caldwell will start officially as... Her first Sunday will be August. Now, Tiffany's been on staff with us for 3 or 4 years, but in a part-time capacity. She'll move to a full-time capacity and be over worship and social media. And so I wanted to let you know that. So Scott's last Sunday's the last Sunday of this month. Tiffany's first Sunday will be the first Sunday of next month. So if you see her, say congratulations. And you can stop asking her now, are you going to do the job? Are you going to take the job? Are you going to She's like, everybody's asking me every Sunday. And so, yes, she is going to do the job. Our search included 1 phone call and 1 interview to 1 person, because that's who we wanted, was Tiffany, and she agreed to do that. So we're excited about that. All right, I got to get you out of here because you're going to have to line up outside. Sorry. Everybody rush to the exits and get there before anybody else, because the traffic's going to be bad because I kept you over a little bit today. But next Sunday, we'll see you next Sunday. We'll talk about the banker, or this afternoon if you're coming.